G'day and welcome back to Reality Check. So this week we've got a good friend of mine and a good friend of the show, Daniel Otis, who's an investigative journalist based in Toronto, Canada, who contributes to CTV News, one of Canada's equivalents, if you like, of CNN. Daniel's been covering UFOs for many, many years, and he's probably one of Canada's foremost journalists investigating the subject. And the reason I want to pull him in today is because of the so-called Sky Canada report. Back in 2022, I think, Canada announced, to everyone's surprise, that it was going to investigate UFOs, UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. And the report came down in June this year. Dan, I'm really keen to hear from you, sir. Do you think the report said anything substantial? What's significant? Or was it a fizzer?
Well, I think there were some people hoping that the report would look into cases and the larger questions around UAP. It didn't do that. It set out, its goals were to look at how UAP reports are collected officially in Canada and to offer recommendations for improvements if needed. Well, they certainly found some recommendations for improvement. And basically, what this report is saying is that, UAP data collection needs to be standardized in Canada, and that there should be a federal body tasked with investigating these sorts of cases. Right now, there's a sort of patchwork of procedures that captures UFO reports through transportation officials, military, Air Force, what have you. But, generally speaking, unless there's a clear national security, defense, or safety nexus, there tends to be no follow-up. What the Sky Canada project is saying is that, reports of this nature are worthy of further scientific study, and that the only way we're going to be able to find answers and get explanations is if we have better data sets, which could happen through, the standardization of reporting mechanisms and proper scientific analysis.
Now, this is very significant. This is the Chief Science Advisor of Canada for the Canadian government acknowledging that unidentified anomalous phenomena needs to be investigated and data collected on it. That in and of itself is very significant, isn't it?
Well, I'd say so. The Chief Science Advisor of Canada reports directly to the Prime Minister and to the Cabinet. It's an arm's length advisory office that, takes on projects on its own initiative. I mean, in the past, it's looked at COVID-19. It's looked at aquaculture. It's looked at questions of open science. And, I guess seeing the news that was coming out of the United States, members of this office their interest was certainly developed out of that, and they decided to dive headlong into it.
Were you consulted? Were you one of the people that was consulted as part of their investigations?
Yeah, absolutely. The final report that was released this summer included a paragraph on my contributions to the field. My journalistic work on this has unveiled procedural material, cases, shown how, UAP reports continue to come in from particularly credible observers like pilots and police officers, and how, there are documents that I've been able to, pull through the Freedom of Information system showing, how these things are cataloged. I was consulted. My work was cited in the report. I've spoken to members of the team at the Sky Canada project. And they also spoke to other folks. I mean, they spoke to Aero. They spoke to the Gaipan UFO group in France. They spoke to a lot of folks and put out a pretty interesting report.
Why have they done this? I mean, it would have been so easy for them to do what, for example, the Australian government continues to do, which is to stick its head in the sand and deny that there's an issue at all. Basically say, look, we're not interested in UFOs. We don't recognise there's any need to investigate them. We've got other priorities. Why, at a time when I know your respective governments and time have basically been criticised for spending too much money on follies, why are they spending money on investigating UAPs?
Well, I think they saw the developments happening south of the border, the ongoing Pentagon efforts to look into the UAP issue, NASA, some of the academic endeavors we're seeing out of the United States. And I think it demonstrated to them that, they're clearly is interest here, that, reports of this nature do continue to come in, that we don't have explanations, and that anything, sort of unknown or unexplained should be looked at through a scientific lens. I think it's very important to note, as I did before, that this is an arm's length scientific advisory office. I mean, had they, not been an arm's length office, who knows if they would have been given the liberty to pursue a topic of this nature. But they did so rather boldly at a time when, there isn't a lot of political capital in discussing this issue. We can talk about putting money into things like this when we have so many other economic problems in our world. But I think it really demonstrated a lot of courage and forward thinking and willingness to tackle this issue seriously.
I agree with you there. I mean, to me, it's quite extraordinary that they've decided to recommend the creation, if you like, of a federal body that would be responsible for collating and investigating UAPs. Has there been any progress from the Canadian government on just how they're going to create such a body and who's going to do it?
It's hard to say. The Sky Canada project report specifically singles out the Canadian Space Agency as being, a trusted scientific body that could undertake this effort. In my communications with the Canadian Space Agency, at least their communications team, the way they paint it, they don't really want to get involved with the issue. We did, however, get a pretty supportive response from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is our federal police force here in Canada. They expressed willingness into supporting this project and cooperating with the Sky Canada project, because it's, in most of Canada, the RCMP, the federal police, are going to be your first point of contact if you want to report something unusual in the sky. They get a lot of reports like this, and they would love for there to be a scientific body that could look at them to free them up to do their, policing work.
So the police have actually said that to you, have they? The Mounties want some kind of investigative agency.
The Mounties have come forward and supporting this issue. And if you look, even in the historical record, the Mounties have been receiving reports of this nature from concerned Canadian citizens for decades upon decades upon decades.
So let's just go back a bit, because one of the things about Canada that intrigues me is for a while there you had a member of parliament, I think his name was Larry Maguire, and he raised interesting concerns in a letter that was directed, I think, to the Defence Minister of Canada, suggesting that there had been historical Canadian military collaboration with the US on UAP crash retrievals. They were very broad inquiries that he made to the Canadian Defence Minister, but essentially a denial came back from the Minister's office that the DRDC, the Defence Research and Development Canada organisation, was doing any current work on UAP. And I have a hunch that that response from the Canadian Defence Minister was a little evasive, that essentially they confined their answer not to a broad denial of any Canadian government scientific investigation and collaboration with the US, but that they constrained their answer back to MP Larry Maguire at the time to the DRDC, to this Defence Research and Development Canada organisation. Did the Sky Canada inquiry at any stage investigate any of the allegations made by Larry Maguire? And what do you know about these claims that were made by Larry Maguire? He seemed to have inside information.
Yeah, well, I guess to start with the Sky Canada project. I mean, the report they released does not touch upon this issue. As I stated before, their real mission was just to look at the current state of procedures and to, offer improvements. They didn't look at these types of allegations, although I'm sure members of the team have looked into this issue. It fell outside of the scope of their report. I mean, with the right political support and the right political will, the report that we see could perhaps be chapter 1 in an ongoing effort. But, we'll need a little bit of political buy-in to make that happen. As for this letter from Mr. Maguire, Larry Maguire is a member, or was a member of Parliament from southern Manitoba and the Canadian prairies. He didn't stand for re-election in the election we had this year, so he's just retired after a long career in public office. He's probably one of the most significant Canadian politicians when it comes to this issue, insofar as his advocacy. I mean, he was advocating for the Sky Canada projects before it was even officially launched. And yes, in his letter to the former defense minister, he asked about, alleged Canadian nexus and crash retrievals and reverse engineering in that matter. The response that came from the Department of Defense, was evasive. As far as I'm aware, Maguire was basing his questions off material that was presented to them by a source. As for corroborating evidence, it's certainly been a hole I've tried diving into, but it's nonstop dead ends. The day I have a document in hand or a witness willing to go on the record about, Canadian nexus and these sorts of allegations, I will certainly run with the story. But, it's been a couple of years of hard digging without finding that conclusive answer.
So as I understand it, there were meetings between Larry Maguire's office and a whistleblower source from inside the scientific establishment in the Canadian military. Was that the allegation you heard?
That's my understanding. I don't think Mr. Maguire pulled these allegations out of thin air. The way it was presented to me by his office is that they were speaking to an individual that they deemed credible who was making allegations of this nature about Canada's historical involvement, perhaps during the Cold War era. But again, this person hasn't wanted to come forward in a public way, as far as I know. And if they're out there listening, they should give you or me a call and come on the show. Because I'd love to hear from them.
I mean, I've heard a whole lot of rumours, and it's speculation only. I mean, I've heard from people in the program, so-called, which is essentially the secret, covert US program that everybody denies exists, which is essentially retrieving and attempting to reverse engineer technology. And there is one source, and I would never use that source because I have to protect them, but they've told me that there has been, and the word is has been, collaboration between Canadian military scientists and American scientists on certain technology. It was even suggested to me that there might be technology which is located in Canada. Have you heard similar allegations?
I've certainly heard things of a similar nature. I pull every thread that presents itself to me, but I have nothing conclusive to say on that one. I hope I can come back and tell you more about that.
Just for our audience to understand, Daniel and I are both journalists who are trained to read press releases backwards. We're trained to read between the lines. And in the answer that came from the former Canadian Defence Minister when she was the Canadian Defence Minister to the question posed by Larry Maguire, it was very interesting that Larry had phrased his question specifically about Defence Department involvement with the American military on crash tech, i.e. UAP technology, non-human technology. And what's interesting was that the minister confined her answer very specifically to this DRDC organisation. And I think that was perhaps a fault with Larry, that he was a bit too sure of himself and he focused his inquiry on the DRDC specifically, which gave the minister an opportunity to specifically deny DRDC involvement. It raises the possibility, I think, likelihood that there have historically been Canadian scientists that are perhaps not part of that so-called DRDC who have and were involved in collaboration with US scientists on alleged retrieved non-human technology.
Well, the DRDC, as it exists now, would be, if there was any sort of scientific analysis happening within the Canadian military, that would be the obvious place where you would find that kind of work happening. Interesting. You say that's former Defense Minister Anita Anand, who now is our foreign minister. So who's dealing directly with the Trump administration as well as other governments. So this is a very prominent individual. I really wish I had more I could share or tell you on this, but for me, it's been, I guess it's very similar to what you're hearing, but it's been difficult to find any kind of corroborating evidence on this one. It's not something I've given up on, though.
No, absolutely. I'm with you. I want to get to the bottom of it. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, Daniel, was there was a memo. I'm not sure if it was you that obtained it, but there was an FOI memo that was provided to the Prime Minister at the time, Mr. Trudeau, which briefed that, quote, full exploitation of the Alaska object was still ongoing. And a later statement from Canadian military clarified that the memo was stating that the object had not yet been found, which is not actually what the memo says. They referred to it as Object Number 23. Object 23's function, method of propulsion, or affiliation to any nation-state remains unverified. It is unknown whether it poses an armed threat or has intelligence collection capabilities. The full exploitation of UAP 20, which was engaged by the US on February the 10th, 2023, has not yet been completed. And just to make things clear, UAP 23 is the one that was tracked over Yukon, entering Canadian airspace. And this is some of the, I think, 4 mystery objects that flew across the United States, only one of which has formally been confirmed as an alleged Chinese government balloon. One of these objects, of course, fell in the Yukon. I thought it was interesting, that memo. What's your takeaway from that memo? Do we assume that there's something to this? What did they mean about full exploitation of the Alaska object? Did you ever get to the bottom of that?
Well, it's hard to say. If you look at the date of the memo, that was a story that I broke for CTV News, revealing this memo. If I recall correctly, I think it was provided by a reader who was doing their own freedom of information work, if I recall correctly. As for the full exploitation, yeah, certainly the word full exploitation implies that, they're actively in the midst of exploiting or analyzing something. What strikes me about these cases, we had the object that was shot down Alaska, Canada's Yukon territory, which borders Alaska, and then one over Lake Huron in the Great Lakes. No information came out. We heard a lot about, this Chinese spy balloon, which we had clear as day photos. But in terms of the other objects, we were given nothing. My work has found some more details. For example, the work I did found images that were taken of the Yukon object. Emails about those images revealed that they were stills from video. I tried to obtain that video and was denied, but we at least got the images. Other freedom of information work has revealed that the RCMP, the Mounties, recovered debris from the shores of Lake Huron. That information was never made public for whatever reason. As for the Alaska object, it's even less has come through. And, the debris that was collected from Lake Huron, according to the internal analysis and the documents I was able to find, made it pretty clear that it was perhaps some sort of smaller weather balloon type device. Okay. But why all the secrecy? And if our militaries and governments are willing to be so intensely secret about something that has a pretty ordinary explanation, I mean, what are they willing to lie and mislead about?
Well, because the reason I really wanted you to make that point is because the findings in this quite, I think, excellent report from Sky Canada are that in order to avoid conspiracy theories, in order to diffuse public speculation that there's something sinister going on with these objects, it's very important to be transparent. And what shocks me is that we are now, 2-3 years on now from those February 2023 overflights that became a massive media issue in not only Canada, but the United States and the rest of the world. It was a huge concern that there'd been these overflights of the continental United States, North America. And we still don't have answers to that mystery. Isn't that in and of itself a spit in the eye to the claims that are made in the Sky Canada report about the importance of transparency and accountability?
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, the lack of transparency certainly has fueled all kinds of theories about these objects, and if my reporting sheds light on perhaps, how ordinary, at least, one of these things was, why all the secrecy? Is it a case of, they're embarrassed for overreacting? Possible. Is it a case of them wanting to cover something up? Yes, also possible. It's frustrating. I find it, not only as a journalist, but as a citizen of Canada, that we had these incidents that dominated headlines and generated a great deal of public curiosity. And, our government and military officials don't have the fundamental respect for the populace to provide them with the answers that they do have when they do have them.
It's interesting because in the Sky Canada report, they actually specifically address, I noticed, the overflying 4 objects, and they acknowledge that one of them was, of course, shot down over the US territorial waters off the coast of South Carolina, and it was identified as originating from a foreign country and carried sophisticated equipment. I think that's the Canadians not wanting to offend China. But it also acknowledged that 1 week later, on February the 11th, 2023, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, ordered the downing of a smaller balloon over Yukon territory, Canadian territory. 2 other small high-altitude balloons, it says, was shot down over US airspace, one in northern Alaska, February the 10th, and the second over Lake Huron on February the 12th. And apparently there was a brief statement by an RCMP, a Mountie spokesperson, to CTV News. The recovered debris from the shores of Lake Huron were deemed not to be of national security concern. If it really is the case that these were, as they say, high-altitude balloons, small high-altitude balloons, why the secrecy?
As I said, I mean, embarrassment for using a very expensive missile to down something, that cost a few $100 perhaps. The desire to cover up something. The secrecy to me seems unnecessary. I mean, I'm a proponent for radical transparency from our governments. That's part of what drew me as a journalist into looking at the UFO UAP issue. I mean, I write about all kinds of things. I do investigations on other subjects too. But this one, it was just so striking to me that we have this history of governments essentially not respecting the public's ability to digest this kind of information. Decades of obfuscation, decades of denials. So to me, this sort of seemed like a continuation of that. Now the Sky Canada project is coming out and saying we need to end this kind of secrecy in order to regain public trust. And when it comes specifically, the UFO issue shows you how public trust can be and government can be eroded. It's clear as day that folks are seeing things they can't explain. Yet it's only just in the past few years, after decades, that we're finally getting, some degree of support from governments publicly saying that, this is a real issue worth looking into.
Now, just returning for a moment to the speculation that was made by Larry Maguire MP when he was an MP to the Canadian Defence Minister that there might be Canadian scientists who had historically involved themselves in collaborating with the US on retrieved non-human alien technology. Incredible allegation. What's fascinating to me is that there is an on-the-record public history in Canada involving a gentleman called Wilbert Smith, who was an engineer with the Department of Transport in Canada in the 1950s. And he asked for permission to do part-time research to investigate whether some UFOs could use the power of Earth's magnetic field as a source of propulsion. They talk about Project Magnet in the Sky Canada report and how Smith essentially expanded its investigative scope to include investigations into the validity of UFO observations. What's interesting is they represent that Smith's work was private work, and yet it's quite clear from what Wilbert Smith said during his lifetime that he was liaising very closely with very senior people in what seems to have been some kind of precursor of what we now know of as the legacy UAP crash retrieval reverse engineering program, he said he was briefed about the secret UAP program by people, scientists in the United States, that the contacts that he made were facilitated by, I think, the Canadian consulate or the Canadian embassy in Washington, D.C., and that he was told that this was a secret that was higher even than the hydrogen bomb. What do you know about the Wilbert Smith story? Was he just an eccentric Canadian engineer who did these investigations on his own bat, or do you think that there was some kind of collaboration going on between Wilbert Smith and scientists or officials in the US military?
I think probably a little bit of both, is my sense of it. He started looking into this in an official capacity. And once the powers that be got a whiff of what he was up to, his official investigations were ended, but that didn't stop him from continuing to dig.
And good on him for doing so.
Absolutely. I mean, like, it appears he did make contacts, in the United States. I'll be frank with you. I'll be honest. My research has mostly focused on contemporary cases and procedures. I work as a journalist, and if you find documents from 70 years ago, most news editors aren't going to get excited about that. They want to see the Royal Canadian Air Force procedures that are on the books today in 2025. So I'm not an expert on Wilbert Smith, but it is, as far as we can tell, the earliest official Canadian investigatory effort into the issue. He took it very seriously. He claims to have been told information that, is echoed in that letter Larry Maguire wrote to the former defense minister. There's, to me, it seems there's threads to pull there, and there's still threads to pull there. The Wilbert Smith papers create a lot of questions that we still don't have conclusive answers for.
Let's talk about some of those contemporary cases that you're aware of. One of the people I think we should probably tip our hat to on the way through here is it Chris Rutkowski? Chris Rutkowski. He's run a civilian organisation for many years inside Canada, which essentially had been, I think, even the referring point by police and other government agencies. You actually had an extraordinary situation where a private UFO data gathering organization led by Mr. Rutkowski was essentially gathering all of the data on UAPs in that part of North America. What do you know about some of the more recent contemporary UAP reports, and have they played any part in prompting the Canadian government to start taking this issue more seriously?
Yeah, well, just to backtrack a little bit about Chris Rutkowski. He's a researcher out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and he's done some interesting work. His group has been collecting and collating Canadian reports for decades, and for a period of almost 20 years, he was receiving some reports directly from Canadian transportation and military officials, which he was using in his survey that he publishes every year. In terms of contemporary reports, my research shows that in very, very recent years, we have pilots on airlines like United, American Airlines, Air Canada, WestJet, Air France, KLM. I could go on and on, reporting unusual lights and objects over Canadian skies. My research has uncovered air traffic control audio where you can hear pilots describing these kinds of lights in real time and their, sense of awe and wonder. I think there's a few specific cases. When you ask the Canadian government, what do you do about UFO reports? The line you get back generally says, we do not, investigate or follow up unless there is a safety, or security issue. And there have been cases where there has been a safety and security issue, and they did follow up. For example, there was a case I found, Oh, I'm trying to remember the year. It's from the 2000s, where it involved an American Airlines flight seeing an unusual light off the Atlantic coast of Canada. Two other flights also see the same light. The Canadian Air Force scrambles CF-18 fighter jets to investigate. They don't see anything. They return home. There's other cases where NORAD radar detects a fast-moving object coming in from over the Arctic. Fighter jets are scrambled. Again, oftentimes the reports show they don't see anything. There's another one right here in Toronto where a Porter Airlines flight approaching the downtown Toronto Island airport coming in from Ottawa. It's cruising in over Lake Ontario, and suddenly there is a donut-shaped object in its path right in front of it. The plane takes a bit of a nosedive evasive action to avoid hitting this object. And because the flight attendants weren't wearing their seatbelts at the time, they were thrown into the cabin structure and they ended up getting sent to the hospital. And the workplace injuries created a safety investigation. And there's literally hundreds of pages of documents and emails of them trying to get to the bottom of this case. And I believe that one was 2016. So there are cases that,
did they get to the bottom of that one? I mean, that one sounds intriguing. What was the finding of the cause of the actual accident? They ultimately determined, the official line that they ended up telling me and other members of the media, it was that the description of the object did not match any known commercially available drone. The internal emails I reviewed showed some degree of speculation that perhaps it was an experimental drone that drifted from a military base in upstate New York. They were floating around images of a sort of donut-filled object that would have been filled with helium with a rotor in it. They said that kind of looked like it. I've actually, in this case, I wrote about it, and afterwards the pilot reached out to me to discuss it. And he said there was, I'm not going to go into details. It was an off-the-record conversation, but I can tell you that he was never given a conclusive answer about what he saw. They were thought maybe it could have been, some kind of military drone, but it was all maybes. There was no conclusive answer. They decided to end the investigation without determining what it was. The flight attendants only had minor injuries. They were released from hospital, and that was the end of it. The thing that really shocks me all the time about both the way the US, Canada, and indeed Australia handle these reports is they often say there is no issue of national security posed by these UAP events. But it's becoming more and more implausible, that assertion. It's certainly not only a national security incident that something is breaching airspace without being identified. It's a flight safety issue as well. I mean, by any measure, what you're describing there is an acute flight safety issue. People were injured because of an unknown object in the sky that they had to avoid.
A huge flight safety issue. Absolutely. National security. I see that. I always, I've said this before. I worry about the national security lens. I was really happy about the Sky Canada project because of its scientific focus. When I talk to journalists in the United States who research this issue, they have a really hard time accessing data. When your national organizations, your defense officials are looking at this seriously as a defense issue, suddenly everything can be withheld through freedom of information. Like I've had a great deal of success pulling reports and cases in Canada precisely because it hasn't been viewed as a national security issue here. Had our military officials operated under that lens, I probably would have only have received a fraction of the data I have thus far. The journalists I talk to in the United States, they can get officials to talk to them about UAPs much easier than we can in Canada, but the data, it becomes so scarce. But the incidents, the shoot down incidents, show, there's a national security nexus. I'm very pleased and supportive of the angle that the Sky Canada project took, specifically that there is a scientific issue here that needs answering.
But is anything going to happen, Daniel? I mean, by the sounds of it, it's now stuck in the bureaucracy. You've said that the Space Agency of Canada doesn't want it on their desk. The Mounties are obviously keen for it to happen. Is there any political impetus, or is it just going to sit on a shelf and gather dust in the office of the chief scientist?
Well, that's the real issue here. You know, with Larry Maguire retiring from politics, we no longer have a political public-facing champion like that in Canada. We don't have anyone in Parliament. I mean, you look at the U.S., you have multiple members of Senate and Congress who are willing to keep hammering this issue. In Canada, with Maguire's retiring, we don't have anyone, I guess, willing to do so publicly. I've had conversations that certainly show that there are members of Parliament who are interested in the issue, but we don't seem to have anyone quite as willing as Mr. Larry Maguire, quite as willing to stick their neck out and become a champion of the cause. And I think without that kind of political support, I'm afraid this could be dead in the water. We have a brand new government in Canada. They're hyper fixated on a lot of the economic challenges posed by the Trump administration and its dealings with Canada. And for them to invest time and money into something of this nature does not seem very probable at this point in time. It's interesting. But, I'd love to be proven wrong.
It's interesting that you speculated that the donut-shaped object that the plane tried to avoid might have come from an upstate New York US military base. Because, of course, the other thing that's been going on in this period is I think they started around October, November last year, the overflights of parts of continental North America by what the government of the United States has euphemistically deemed drones. I don't know if that's an appropriate term, but were the drone sightings, I've had messages from people in Canada, notably in Toronto, who've sent me videos and photographs of weird looking objects that frankly look like aircraft, but are moving so pathetically slowly. In some cases, they're stationary. They're not. Have you had the same drone so-called alerts in your part of North America?
I don't think we've had the kind of mass sightings that we were seeing on the Northeast in the United States. But yeah, listen, I get multiple emails a week from Canadians seeing things like this, in Toronto, way out in the middle of, in small towns in the middle of nowhere, in big cities. I mean, in the country, in the urban settings, people are seeing things. One other thing I'd like to bring up about that sighting over Lake Ontario is that we also have two significant nuclear power plants just outside of Toronto on the shores of Lake Ontario. I want to bring this, we talk about government transparency. I'm in a multi-year battle now to try and get security reports on UFO sightings from these nuclear power plants released. They're
refusing to release them, are they?
They refuse to release them. This was I think I first filed my request in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. They refused to release them. I filed a complaint. We went through mediation. They continued to refuse to release them. And then in addition to refusing to release them, they hired outside counsel to create a legal justification that stated that they are, a provincial crown corporation. So a provincial governmental corporation runs these nuclear power plants. And what they're trying to argue now is that by following the provincial freedom of information legislation, they would therefore be in violation of their federal nuclear security obligations.
And yet we have this Sky Canada report saying that one of the things that is most essential is for the public to be discouraged from developing conspiracy theories by the government being as open as possible about everything that it knows on the subject of UAPs. It's a total contradiction, isn't it?
Yeah, but this isn't even just not being transparent. This is putting taxpayer money into fighting transparency. Thankfully, I was able to find a lawyer, Josh DeHaas, with the Canadian Constitution Foundation, who's taking on this case pro bono. And the Ontario Power Generation, the folks that operate this nuclear power plant were really trying to drown me in legalese. And
it's funny you should mention it, because there is a nexus, isn't there, between nuclear plants, nuclear power facilities, and UAP sightings. Have you had anecdotal reports that have led to you asking for these FOI reports?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
So people are telling you that
multiple. I've had people reach out. Not folks necessarily willing to go on the record and describe their stories, but I heard enough echoes of this that it prompted me to file these requests. They denied them. I immediately asked if records were, identified. They said yes. And hence now I'm in this multi-year, legal wrangling. We hear that in the United States. We hear that in other countries that, there have been interesting and significant sightings in and around nuclear facilities or nuclear weapon facilities. I very much want to see if that's the case in Canada, but they are fighting me tooth and nail when it comes to getting these reports out.
Why do you think that is, Daniel? I mean, obviously, there's a tendency, I think, for all of us to default to a conspiracy theory that they're trying to hide something. Do you think there's a good reason why they're trying to conceal this information?
I'm a little biased here. I think they don't have no good reason. They don't want to deal with it. Their argument is that releasing these security reports reveal vulnerabilities in their defenses. I've actually toured I've toured one of these nuclear power plants for an unrelated story, and you have guys with assault rifles and high levels of security. But my argument has always been, release the reports, redact everything that could violate your security or make you folks vulnerable, and provide me with the descriptions of, these objects or lights themselves. But they don't want to do that.
I think it's wonderful that you're getting pro bono legal assistance. Could you just name again the lawyer that's doing this good work on your behalf?
His name is Josh DeHaas with the Canadian Constitution Foundation. Josh is a former journalist, actually. We met as journalists. He left journalism to pursue a law career. And when this fight started heating up, I reached out to him, and he just happened to be working with a legal organization that, takes on cases, in terms of that deal with free speech or transparency and government secrecy.
Well, and good on Josh. Yeah. Good on him for doing that. I also think it's important too that one of the other things that came through to me from the Sky Canada report that I thought was really interesting was that not only do Canadians report somewhere between 600 to 1,000 UAP sightings annually, they did a survey for Sky Canada, and the survey's results are actually quite profound. 1 in 4 respondents said that they had personally witnessed a UAP in their lifetime. A quarter of respondents said they'd seen a UAP, but only 10% reported their sightings, and 40% of respondents wouldn't know whom to report their sightings to anyway. And interestingly, a majority of the respondents supported the idea of creating a federal government service to gather UAP reports and to make those findings publicly available. So you really do have public opinion on your side, Daniel.
Absolutely. And when I saw that was interesting that they commissioned an outside consulting company to do this work. I would be one of those people. Many years ago, I saw some odd moving lights in the sky. And I didn't, I'm like, that's interesting. I didn't think anything of it. Didn't report it to anybody. And, you get a group of people together or start asking people questions in a bar. You usually hear similar stories from people. People see things, and they, most people don't want to stick their necks out. And in my case, I saw something weird like that as a kid. It was with my brother. We saw it. Wow. And we both remember it to this day, but, most people just don't report. It's just something that happens and they scratch their head and go on with their lives. Hopefully, if the Sky Canada recommendations are implemented and we have a new federal body that standardizes and collects these reports and they engage in the sort of public outreach that the Sky Canada project is recommending, then maybe this will get on people's radar. Oh, I saw something weird. It's in the interest of science that I report this to this body. The only way we can get to truth and answers is with more and better data. And, their recommendations, if implemented, would provide us with more and better data. And I really hope, I hope to see that implemented.
Well, if implemented is the order of the day, I sincerely hope, Daniel Otis, that you do get an implementation of the recommendations of the Office of the Chief Science Advisor from the Sky Canada report of June 2025, because I think it's a very important report. How can people get in touch with you, Daniel, if, for example, a scientist that has collaborated with the United States on secret retrieved alien technology does want to share some information? How do they get in touch with you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter or X, DS Otis. My direct messages are always open. Always happy to move over to more secured communication apps once initial contact has been made. You can find my website, danielotis.ca. Email me, otisstories@gmail.com. Google, I'm on YouTube. I'm there. You can find me. Tell me your stories. I would really like to hear more about those allegations.
And I think for the people out there who might be equivocating about whether their stories are relevant, whether they're useful, please, either Daniel or I, feel free to come forward. We're very, very happy to take your tips and very happy to process them. Daniel Otis, thank you so much for joining Reality Check. I look forward to getting you back on the show when you finally, hopefully, win your FOI case against the Lake Ontario nuclear power plant, and we find out all about the disturbing UAP sightings that plant's so desperately trying to conceal.
Thank you so much for having me. I am not going to give up on that or any of these. As a journalist, you see a thread, you got to pull it. So wherever it leads us, we'll find the truth. Thanks a lot, Ross.
Good on you. And before we go, please don't forget to send in your questions for our weekly question and answer. You can email us at realitycheck@newsnationnow.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Hello and welcome to Reality Check. I'm Ross Coulthart. And today we have an intriguing story. UAPs recorded and analysed off the coast of Long Island, just to the east of New York. Two twin brothers, Jerry and John Tedesco, are Long Island natives. Both of them are electrical engineers. They're both passionately interested in science, and as it happens, they also have a very close interest in UFOs, UAPs. Now, they're concerned a few years ago about possible cancer clusters on Long Island, and so they build a mobile lab in an RV to monitor atmospheric smog and to also research electromagnetic emissions such as those from cell phone towers. But in 2021, as they're making their research plan, they read the report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. That's America's intelligence boss, the chief intelligence czar in the United States. And the ODNI made an extraordinary declaration back in 2021 that after 70 years of denial about the existence of the reality of UFOs, not only did the ODNI confirm they are real, they acknowledged they are. UAPs are a threat to flight safety and a possible risk to national security. And it's fair to say this finding by the ODNI sent their research in a completely different and, as it happens, very fruitful direction. John and Jerry teamed up with another Long Island native, Donna Lee Nardo, a journalist, investigator, and professional communications expert who's also interested in science and UFOs. They started in 2022, and they continued through to July 2023. And in August this year, they achieved the almost impossible task of getting a field research study on UFOs, UAPs, off the coast of Long Island, peer-reviewed and published in the Open Journal of Applied Sciences. Their report, which is now a book called Nightcrawler Eye on the Sky, is groundbreaking. And I know their research has captured the attention of some very influential scientists and officials, including in Homeland Security and the FBI, who at the moment do not publicly acknowledge their very, very close interest in this subject. They're looking much closer at the UAP mystery than they currently care to publicly admit. And if you see just how close this site where the Tedescos have been viewing just off the coast of North Long Island is to, say, the approaches to JFK International Airport, and of course one of America's biggest cities, New York City, you'd understand why there is a public interest national security risk here. So the Journal of Applied Sciences paper presents the findings from their 10-month field study at the Robert Moses State Park on the south shore of Long Island. Their objective was to determine if unknown aerial phenomena existed over this coastal location, and if so, to study it. And boy, have they done well. I want to tell you about a product that happily is sponsoring Reality Check, and which also addresses some of the egregious food that you Americans happen to eat. And it's all about the Gut Cleanse BioComplete 3. The theory that is pushed by the Gut Cleanse BioComplete 3 product is that there is a potential toxin in all of the, quote, healthy foods that scientists have been telling us to eat with a fraudulent food pyramid for some considerable time. One day I will do a story on Reality Check about the American ultra-processed food diet and why I fear for this beautiful country that it seems to be suffering from the appalling food that it eats, and it needs a fix. Well, maybe that fix is the Gut Cleanse BioComplete 3. There's a Dr. Gundry, a world-renowned cardiologist, who is saying that there's a potential toxin in our food that's causing huge digestive issues, and it's affecting millions of people worldwide. The warning signs include weight gain, fatigue, digestive disorder, stiff joints, even skin problems. And Dr. Gundry explains that these side effects are often mistaken for normal signs of aging because digestive issues develop usually over a matter of years and sometimes even decades. And I can assure you that the damage that we're talking about is probably caused by these supposed health foods, and it's far from normal. The good news is you can fix this problem from your own home. It's very simple. You just have to know which foods are actually healthy and which contain this hidden potential toxin. So you can find this yourself at the gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross. That's gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross. And if you go there, you'll find that after years of research, Dr. Gundry has decided to release an informative video to the public for free, and it's uninterrupted, showcasing exactly which foods you need to avoid. Go find that video at gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross and click on the link in the description below. Okay, let's get into the show. So guys, welcome to Reality Check. And I suppose to kick off, how far away is this site where you were doing your study from the location that Navy pilots off the east coast of the US were seeing anomalous objects frequently, and as I understand it, still do?
Well, first of all, it's a privilege to be here, Ross.
Yeah, absolutely.
For all of us. And so the Navy sightings were, I believe, down around the Virginia area. And further down, I guess, Jacksonville, off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. Whiskey
72 was the Virginia area.
Right, is what they classified it as.
The training area.
The information that we have and what we've heard back from Ryan Graves is that, these things have been spotted literally 10 miles off the shore of Virginia and further out. Objects moving, east to west. I'm sorry, west to east in this case. Nothing that moved back over land. So we had chosen Robert Moses State Park because the island extends literally from the main coastline, New Jersey, and the city, about 140, 150 miles, from the coast. And where we're situated, we're roughly about 55 miles at that point. So we're looking 55 miles out at sea in a southwest direction, and literally about 55 miles from the deep water trench. So we have a pretty good vantage point, especially using our long range sensors, the X-band radar system that we have, that we got FCC clearance for as experimental use, and some of the hyperspectral cameras.
Let's cut to the quick. Donna, maybe you can answer this.
Yes.
Let's do some quick, short answers. Are these objects, you all believe, intelligently controlled on the basis of the evidence you've uncovered?
I think that there is a possibility that indeed they are, and I think John, Jerry, and I feel that way.
Are they a technology?
I think that there's a possibility that is definitely among the numerous possibilities, and I think, again, that's a hypothesis that John, Jerry, and I share.
And I'll throw this one open to all of you. Is this evidence of a non-human intelligence?
I think it's potential evidence of non-human intelligence. I mean, it appears to show awareness. It appears to show some intelligent actions. At times, occasionally you'll see it meander along the shoreline, these objects, or they'll loiter along the shoreline. But they also would also show an awareness of us being out there,
Yeah,
and actually responds to some of the things we're doing.
Right. And we've used LiDAR. We've used long-range torches, both visible light and invisible light, the infrared, and we've had reactions. We have almost like a form of acknowledgement or communications.
So when you say acknowledgement, what do you mean? What happens?
So in one particular case, we had an object that once we hit it with a infrared torch, we noticed that in the night vision cameras, this object suddenly moved its position away from the torch.
It seemed to evade
it evaded the light, and it did it several times.
Look, my favorite video of all of the ones you've got, and it's called the Peekaboo video.
Yes.
And there's a road sign. Is this shot on infrared? There's a road sign, and you see a whitish orb coming out from behind the road sign. So obviously not far away from you. It's on the beach. And it seems to be coming out, peeking at you, and then tucking back behind the sign again.
Yes. It was very unusual that night. We were just preparing the instrumentation and setting up the infrared cameras, and we noticed in the recording that the cameras itself had recorded an object that literally appeared from the right side of the sign. And as I moved the camera back to that direction, because I caught this in the camera at the corner of my eye, and I said, I saw something. And I tracked this object. As I focused the camera on it, the object moved suddenly behind the sign again. And it did this several times. As I moved the camera away, the object came out from behind the sign, and then was basically chasing it back and forth.
So that's an object that appears to know you're working with some kind of camera technology. It knows it's being monitored, and it's trying to avoid being captured on camera.
That's what we believe. Yes, that it did acknowledge, that it was being videotaped, or it's being tracked in some way, and it did try to evade that track.
And it did this about 4 times.
Mm-hmm. And Ross, this was a few months into phase 1 study. So whatever this phenomena is that we witnessed over and over again at that site, it had come to know us, but especially John, because John torched it with the high, heavy lights, and then these objects sometimes, as you said before, would react, blink, they would move away. So I think that basically it was trying to communicate or give a notice to John, because it was John who spotted it.
Right.
So
And
one thing I'm really interested in is there's a video that isn't within the period of your field study, but you very kindly shared it with me. It was shot, I think, on the 15th of July this year, and it appears to show a cube-like, certainly polyhedral object, and you've hit it with a LiDAR, which is a laser that can detect and range. It's a remote sensing method. So you shine
yes.
a LiDAR at it. What happens? Describe it to me.
Yeah. So what happened is we had a refraction or reflection at times from this object, and the odd part about it is that the distance that was given back on the reflection didn't really make a lot of sense. It didn't correspond to an object that I initially thought was about better than 500 meters from where I was. But I hit it twice in a clear line of sight, and the reflection back in both cases showed about 45 feet from where I was standing, which did make a whole lot of sense.
Was it 45 feet away?
It was not 45 feet. It had to have been much further than that. Why I got that kind of reflection back, is still kind of a mystery, and we're wondering whether this has something to do with gravitational lensing or some kind of distortion around these objects that is producing it.
Now, that's interesting in the implications, because if it is gravitational lensing, it suggests that whatever the object is, it has a technology that's capable of distorting space-time, which of course is the long speculated Alcubierre theory to explain how these objects might be able to move. Um, Can I ask you this? Does the LiDAR allow you to assess whether the object had mass? Could it not just be a ball of plasma or perhaps some ball lightning or something like that?
That's difficult to say. I mean, a reflection from the object would indicate that there was some mass there, but we don't know in what form. If it's more of a gaseous state, or if it's there's some solid to it. But there were times that we did get reflections, and other times we could get a reflection. It actually looked like the LiDAR beam itself was never really making contact,
Right.
And almost in a form of distortion around it.
It sounds to me like you've got a non-human intelligence biting at your heels underneath the table there. Is that a little puppy or something you've got under the desk there?
Yes. Just dying to get out here.
I feel the need to explain that to our audience. Otherwise, they're going to wonder what those strange noises are.
Sorry.
Can I just double check? There's an aeronautical chart in what you sent me, which shows your area of interest. And there's a big circle in red. And the thing I found interesting about this chart is it highlights, in my opinion, why UAP detection and monitoring matters, and why good science, good research like yours into this phenomenon matters. Because where you are located, your area of interest signaled by that circle of red on the chart, that's one of the approach routes, isn't it, into JFK? That's an extraordinarily busy aircraft corridor. I don't understand how you guys can be seeing dozens of weird anomalous objects that apparently have mass moving around in an aircraft corridor, and this isn't a flight safety, national security issue.
Right. It's we've seen this since we started this research, and we've been carefully examining the flight corridor. Now you have JFK to the west of us, and you have other airports, especially in Connecticut, doing a flyover. You have MacArthur Airport. You have LaGuardia as well. To the west, so we have a very busy corridor of flights, but we've also seen these objects. We've seen these objects in combination with air travel. We'll be out there with our hyperspectral cameras, and we'll record these objects that seem to be at times in the flight paths of these aircraft.
Well, actually, there is one object.
The Tic Tac.
Yeah, well, there is the Tic Tac object, which is extraordinary. I mean, you basically show, and it does. It looks like a Tic Tac underneath an aircraft. The cylindrical object passes right beside an aircraft at speed during the day. It's a very clear image, and the slow mo at around about 49 seconds shows how close it came to the aircraft. I held my breath when I saw this because I thought, one, you've captured a Tic Tac. And two, it's right beside an aircraft. I'm not surprised that Homeland Security and FBI and other agencies are interested in your work.
Another interesting feature of that video is in one frame of it, we had noticed that there was a flash, and when we froze it in that frame, you could see the object has a club shape to it. The larger end in the direction of travel, and it had two lights on the surface, or two shiny reflective surfaces, or very reflective surfaces on top of it. And it only did this in one frame. It looked like it changed its orientation, and these two spots appear to be lights on it. But it's very different from an aircraft. It's got an odd shape to it. It's got this club shape to it.
Right, and what Gerald said too, it's only in one frame. Out of that 45 seconds, it's only in one frame of video that we saw this. So it's not navigation lights, which have a regular pattern to them, flash pattern, and that's predictable. We'll see that with most aircraft. This also had a reflective silhouette to it, almost like it appeared to be white, and you could see the rising sun underneath it. You could see the orange glow from the sun.
Give me a big picture here. You did this study over 10 months at this Robert Moses State Park on Long Island, just to the east of New York. How many objects of an anomalous nature did you see? And what's your rough conclusion? I mean, what do you think this is?
So in this case here, we've seen one that appeared to be almost like a tic-tac shape. Most of the objects we've been seeing look like this, what we call spheroids, with a polyhedron center to it, something that looks like a cube or a rotating cube of some sort.
So this is very similar to the object described by FA-18 pilot Ryan Graves and his colleagues that were being seen by Navy pilots off the East Coast, just a bit further south, off the coast of Virginia. You're seeing, have you seen the phenomenon of I think it's the cube within the sphere?
What we've been seeing is it's more of a polyhedral shape to it, but depending on how many sides this polyhedron has, I mean, you could have a side that looks perfectly square and lit up, and if it's the more sides it has, the more rounder it becomes. So it could look like a sphere around a cube.
Right, and the spin rate is variable too. It's not, we've seen them rotate at a relatively slow pace, and then other times we'll see them where they seem to almost speed up. They accelerate, and when they accelerate, they get brighter and they almost look like they give off this intense light, this spheroid light, which it's the colors vary from orange, white, red, green. We've seen, and they can be pretty intense.
Can I ask? Do you ever see these objects with kind of a plasmatic hue around them, some kind of aura around them? A lot of scientists I've spoken to say that if there is a propulsion system, you might see a purplish hue. Have you seen that?
Yes. As a matter of fact,
we have a video of one with a bluish or purplish hue around it.
Yeah, it's in a video, but we also have a UVC detection on it. Mm-hmm. Now, the UVC is an ultraviolet C-band detector. These are very sensitive binary detectors, and we've had it out there. And in this particular case, while observing the object, our detector went off several times, indicating that there was a UV energy that was coming off of this object. UV is indicative of a plasma or some kind of a discharge, an arc of some sort that's giving off this particular wavelength.
Did you pick up any gamma radiation, any dangerous ionizing radiation?
Nothing like that. We that might have been too far from it, maybe distance-wise, but we were always monitoring for the higher energy radiation, for alpha, beta, gamma, and so forth. That's not something that we were able to indicate.
Donna, can you do the broad brush for me? I'm really interested in getting a summary, a short encapsulating paragraph that summarizes the scope of your work and how many objects, how many anomalous events you recorded. Can you give me that rough pen sketch?
Well, I will say, with evidence to back up, 50, because we have approximately 50 video clips of various phenomena that we put into the bucket because of investigating all other options, that they're unknowns. So while we may not know for sure what they are, we know they're not anything that's prosaic. They're not not an airplane. It's we don't think that any of them were drones, at least not drones in the normal sense of drone, because no flashing lights, no sound. John's acoustics, Jerry's acoustics would pick that up, be able to see the flash.
Right. And what I do want to say too is that, we spent a good portion of this research looking for prosaic explanations for this stuff. So we examined, a lot of the flight travel, the various different aircrafts, the engine sounds, and we categorized a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And like I said, we spent, I would say, probably at least 6 months making the determination whether or not it was a commercial aircraft, or something that we could, a biomass of some sort, birds, bats, insects. So we tried to isolate as much as we could before putting this into that other bucket.
And one of the first things we did is we did an assessment of the scene. We actually mapped the flight corridor of the airport, which is 38 miles to the west. So most of the time we would steer away from that area. And most of the time we would spend most of our observations after 12, or most of the air flights would diminish down to virtually nothing.
And that's
And
what
we're still seeing these objects.
phenomena was during that after 12. Those after
Yes,
12
right. The bulk of it, yes.
there was outliers. But one other thing is, John and Jerry, when they first started building the Nightcrawler, the telemetry vehicle, the platform to observe, and with all the sensors that we take to these beach sites to do the study. John lives near an airport, so John spends considerable time also just hovering around that area, because you can look up into the sky, and they studied the planes, they studied the tracks, they studied the sounds, they studied how it looks with this camera, how it looks with the IR camera, how it looks with the planetary camera. So they had a pretty good idea of what would be a plane in the sky before we even got to Robert Moses State Park.
Right. From our vantage point, especially where we live, it's all you do is look at planes.
Yeah, it gave us an advantage.
Yeah.
Even found some anomalies, because they were showing me charts before the project got started. It was just in the preliminary stages. They were building the first Nightcrawler platform, and they were seeing things in the sky around the airport that they were already able to differentiate from a plane, from a helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I find hilarious is you guys have essentially become the UAP Ghostbusters vehicle. This RV of yours sounds legendary. Tell me what you've got in there in the way of scientific equipment. It's quite an extraordinary vehicle, I understand.
Yes, so it's it was quite a creation from some start to, well, not quite finished yet, but it's still growing.
There was actually 2 versions of it.
Yeah, and this is the second version. The first version was actually built too high. Had too much weight. It's the vehicle you couldn't get out of its own way. So we ended up with a regular RV, a 30-foot RV, and we kind of gutted it out. We put the equipment in there. Actually built a Faraday cage around it. Believe it or not. It's a metal mesh built within the walls, the floors, the ceiling. And once everything's closed,
just explain why you would build a Faraday cage, just for our audience.
So a Faraday cage was basically to isolate the equipment from any external EMI, external emissions, radio emissions. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't influencing our measurements. So like I said, once this thing is closed up, everything from the external, even cell phones, your cell phone signal would pretty much die out once the door is closed. And this was necessary in order to safeguard our data. We collected a lot of data over that period of time. And we found early on that even some of the acoustic data was being interfered with radio frequencies, because you got 5G cell towers down there that are working at these momentary high power levels. these peak power levels, and they could actually induce a radio frequency into a microphone, and it would sound like audio. It would sound like it's an acoustic tone, but it's not. It's actually being picked up by the EMI.
So the crucially important thing here is that, like the US Navy with the Nimitz incident, you've not just taken video and used the A1 human eyeball to witness these objects. Mm-hmm. You've also used hyperspectral imaging cameras. You've got wideband marine radars, which you've actually got two, so you can cross-reference. You can, what do you call, triangulate those radars for more accurate image. You've got different types of UV camera, infrared camera. Give me, what else have you got? How much did this cost you? It must have been a phenomenal amount of money to even buy a hyperspectral camera.
It was approximately probably about close to $250,000.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more by this time. It's
and of course we kept spending after that.
$275, but
updating.
But it's of course we're continually updating. The course, and a lot of it came out of my retirement.
I was about to say, what do your long-suffering wives say about you spending the retirement fund on this UAP passion project?
She says, you better get busy with this project.
Luckily, we did get a funder that helped us.
Yes, that's true.
Because that money was running low. We did get a funder who believed in what we were doing, and he funded us the rest of the way to finish up the phase 1 project.
Right. It was the same funder that helped with the Galileo project with Harvard University.
Do you want to acknowledge that funder if they want to be publicly acknowledged? I think it's important.
I would love to. I mean, I think he's a phenomenal person. His name is Eugene Jung, and
great human being.
Yeah, great human being, and he's got a big interest in this stuff and science in general, and promoting it and the cause. And he's also been very helpful during the virus outbreak. He's helped a lot of different causes. But he's given a lot. He's given a lot back to society.
Donna?
A lot of money was spent for phase 1 study. A lot of money is needed to continue phase 2 and beyond. But there are university endeavors right now at the university level trying to approach some of the same objectives we have. And we have results. We have data. We have a published paper. We have a book. And we're continuing to look for funding for the phase 2 study, which we have a lot of new objectives that we'd like to tackle. And some of these other university endeavors are asking for millions, have received millions. And so we were able to fulfill the phase 1 study with data that was recognized in a scientific journal and has attracted the interest of the FBI's expressed an interest in our work. State and local government has expressed an interest in our work. First responders, we're collaborating with them. It goes on and on and on. And we've updated the academic community who also has been very supportive. Mm-hmm. But we've not received any funding, the same type of funding at the level of the academic.
Right. And we remain transparent to everything that we find. Any finding that we have, it's we're trying to be transparent, and we like collaboration and feedback from other, from academia, especially, there's other professionals. There's we work with pilots and of course, law enforcement and that sort of thing. But it's not something that we want to keep under wraps, and we try to get that information out there. And early on we did it through a book.
So to finish my point, we do these types of studies evidently at a fraction of the cost and produce results, we hope, also in the second phase.
I totally agree with you, Donna. I mean, one of the reasons I'm so keen to get you guys on is because what you've shown is that good citizen science can actually make breakthroughs. I find the work that you've done very, very exciting. And I want to get into the nitty-gritty of that now. One of the things that you talk about in your RF report, your radio frequency report, is that there's a spike at 4.06 gigahertz. And it doesn't seem to be a broadband frequency. It's not anything like Wi-Fi, 4G or 5G. Do you think that spike is associated with the anomalous phenomenon that you've been videoing?
It's hard to say. Unfortunately, we're nearby, cell towers, 5G cell towers that are giving out pretty strong signals, and a lot of them. Some of these signals are spread spectrum. They're random, but there are a couple of signals that during times of higher traffic with the observations, we've noticed carriers around 1.6 gigahertz and 3 gigahertz. And these are the signals that we're really kind of focusing on at this point. Some of the other signals, they could be GPS. There are law enforcement communications as well that we're intercepting, but it's at times it's very difficult to isolate the background noise from all these other signals. Like I said, the ones that we're really focused on right now is the two in particular, which is the 3 and the 1.6.
So you are seeing something in the 3 gigahertz range, which of course is a well-known mysterious range.
Yes.
And we're seeing it correlates actually when these objects seem to appear.
Right.
So the 3 gigahertz range I think it's also the range that's been picked up at the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. You're seeing something anomalous in that frequency range as well.
Right. And what's tricky about that signal too is that there's some radar, especially where we're close to the water. There's ships that use a very similar frequency range, which is S-band radar. S-band radar is anywhere between 2.9 and 3.1 gigahertz. So we're very careful as to try to isolate that from these erroneous signals that we've been getting. And there are times that these ships are not within 36 miles of our location, and we're still receiving some of these signals with this higher activity.
Yep.
Now, I want to squeeze into this program as many of the videos and images as possible so that our audience can see some of the excellent work that you've done. You see 4 orb objects over the ocean from the beach. Just talk me through what we're seeing on that video. Can you just describe it to me? What are we seeing on that video? One appears to be in the water. There's an object either in the water or just above it. And then I think it's you, John. You say there's a shadow of something dark that you can see at the back. And then
I believe that was Jerry.
Yeah. that was actually that particular shadow is actually an artifact produced by the IR. It's almost what the mountain climbers called Brock inspectors, but in our case, it's produced by an IR instead of a fog.
But there was something anomalous that happened. Tell me what happened.
Yes, there's what you talked about. We actually saw an orb of light. So one of the spheroids we're talking about, there was one hovering low over the water. It was actually casting a reflection on the water. And it was changing its elevation periodically. It was also changing its spin rate. As it spun faster, it increased its luminosity. As it decreased its spin rate, the luminosity would drop. And you would almost start to see that polyhedral appearance. There was also about 4 or 5 other objects that appeared, and all of them were in different spectral ranges. The only one that was visible was the one on the water. And this is what we thought maybe some kind of signature management or their ability to change spectral range.
The objects that were basically over the water, low over the horizon, were in the infrared. They were being detected in the infrared. They couldn't be seen visibly by any of us. The only object that we could see clearly and was very visible was the object that was over the water. We approximated it was roughly about 13 feet, and it was casting a light that was the seas were pretty calm at that point, and you could see this rotation of this light under the object itself.
It was very intense, very intense.
There's another video 4. It's an orb with satellites. A big purplish orb has a whole lot of little orbs around it, and they're strobing like crazy. I mean, it's quite an extraordinary video. Can you talk me through that?
Yeah, that's one that would appear off the shoreline. We noticed the large orb in the middle was actually we could actually make that out visibly. It was both in the visible and IR range. The smaller orbs, or the smaller satellite orbs, were all in the infrared. Those we couldn't see with our eyes.
Right, and something else I want to say too is that we were tracking this on the main monitor, the main video monitor inside the RV. And what we do is we want to make sure that these are not star constellation, part of a constellation, star pattern. So we used, stellarium mapping, and there's a couple of other utilities we used as well out there in the field. And what we'll do is we use a dry erase marker. We'll actually mark the positions on the monitor, which is fixed at that point. And we'll look for this change in the movement of the stars, with the rotation of the Earth. These objects would remain fixed for long periods of time. And we knew right away that they weren't stars. I think there's been researchers in the past that have called them pseudo-stars.
Now, the other thing I noticed about that video is you describe an anomalous battery drain on video 4.
Yes.
So what happened?
When we were out there, these were relatively close to the shoreline and weren't that far. Some of the hyperspectral cameras we had a full battery drain, and we had checked the batteries before we went out there. So that was something we couldn't explain, and that's happened several times when we have these kinds of encounters.
Now, this is obviously a very common phenomenon with people who try to record with cameras anomalous phenomena. It seems to be able to screw back with us by draining our electrical devices. How often did that happen to you?
Probably at least half a dozen times, maybe.
Yeah, maybe over the period of 2 years, at least six times that we were pretty sure how charged with the charge state of the batteries, and there's no reason that the batteries should have discharged as quickly as they did.
You actually had a time where we actually had a complete power failure, even the generator cut out.
Yes.
Well, that's that famous scene in Close Encounters, isn't it? Where the craft appears and then everything goes dead. I have to admit, there are times in your videos where even you guys sound like, you're pretty seasoned observers, all three of you. But there's times when all of you sound a bit freaked out as the objects are coming towards
we
them.
were. And it happened often. We were spooked.
It's like an episode of Blair Witch Project. It's quite funny because on video 20, you see the three objects in a distance. It's about 12:30 at night, so it's dark. It's the witching hour. And I think, John, you say on the audio, we just had a close encounter. It came right up to us on the beach. We ran like a bunch of p***ies.
Excuse the language.
It was an embarrassing moment for us. It wasn't our high point.
But the bit I liked was that was effing unbelievable. Clearly, it had a huge effect on you. What you're seeing with your eyeball is more dramatic than what you're capturing with your camera.
Yes, yes, that was an event that happened in roughly the end of the second month of our research.
It was August 28th, 2022.
Yeah, and
I remember the date.
Right, it happened just after midnight. It was 12:15 when we actually had the encounter. But there was a triangular formation of. We weren't sure if it was a part of one object, but I would say that right now the consensus is that there was three separate objects.
Well, we confirmed it because when we watched that video the second time around after the recordings were made, is we had panned over to the right, and the objects actually separated and they rose in elevation. There was a bright red flash, and all the objects were gone.
And they disappeared. Yeah. So, but they remained stable out there for almost 45 minutes. Yeah. That pattern. And that night, we had wind gusts of greater than 35 miles per hour. So, for something to remain as stable as it was, I mean, it wasn't drones, it wasn't balloons, it wasn't
these weren't
any
fixed,
of that stuff.
These weren't fixed positions, and even a helicopter, you're going to have movement with those kind of winds. You're not going to have something.
No sound at all, and nothing visible, nothing in the visible light. It was all in the infrared.
There's one particularly interesting video. I think it's first shown in video 5. It's called Merging Sky Objects with Cohension. And you see a large glowing object that seems to be flickering, and then it moves up and perhaps into another object that seems to be hidden inside the cloud. Can you talk me through that one?
Yes, that one caught us by surprise. We were nearing an area called Democrat Point. And I had been videotaping an object up there, and the object it seemed to have rotation to it. It was giving off like a kaleidoscope of color as it was rotating. And tracking the object, I realized that there was another source of light that was coming down from the cloud layers, and it was getting sharper and sharper, and it seemed to form the same shape as the object that I was visualizing up to that point. And the object never really did come down from the cloud layer, but you could see the brightness, intensity of it. And then this object that I had been tracking seemed like it cohesed or fused with the other object, and they synchronized rotation together. You could see it was twice its size, and they were rotating in the same direction. And then both objects just moved up into the cloud layers, and that was it. We didn't see anything further. But we went frame by frame. We analyzed the tape, the video on it, and I'm dating myself. I keep saying tape. The digital recording, and you could see that, within these frames, you could see that these objects almost, if they weren't cohesed, they're extremely close together when they synchronized rotation.
So one of the questions I should have asked you early on is, you've got these two radars, and what's the benefit of having two radars? And a further question on this question is, how often were you able to confirm that the objects that you were seeing were solid enough to register on radar?
Right. I'll start it out. Is we have two radars on top of the vehicle. We have one in a horizontal axis and one on a vertical axis. And the reason being is we've got a better cross section of the object. One gets higher elevation, one is vertically mounted. The horizontal one gets a wider sweep, an azimuth.
Yeah. So the X-band radar, what we want to do is we want to capture distant ships out there. We're going into phase 2, and we're seeing some anomalous reflections that they're called anomalous propagations. There's something that was discovered back in the 1920s. Of a reflected signal using a radar system, even the early radar systems, that would not lose energy. They would be reflected back, and the intensity was the same. If a reflected radio wave would bounce off in the ionosphere and came back late, the intensity level, the energy levels would be quite a bit lower than the actual transmitted signal. This is something that we've been seeing on a regular basis.
Can I just ask, though, very quickly, have you been able to get radar tracks of some of these anomalous objects to confirm that they are delivering a radar image? They're solid enough to deliver a radar image?
What we get is we get solid. They're intermittent. The context we get, but they correlate with what we're seeing on the hyperspectral cameras. They'll appear in the same areas.
Right, at times, and then you'll see reflections in totally different locations, but they don't remain. They don't remain with a continuous sweep. You'll see these objects that you'll see one sweep that the object will be there. And they're color coded. The screen itself, the echo trails are red. We have red defined as a solid reflection. When you're doing rain studies, or you're doing precipitation, you'll have a color, maybe green or orange, indicating that the density is not there. And then these objects are solid. These are solid returns, but they're not there all the time.
That's what I was coming to. So these aren't rain clouds. They're not biomass. No, they're not birds out over the ocean. They're not insect swarms. Nope. You've been able to exclude those prosaic explanations.
Yes. Right. And we'll adjust the clutter settings on the radar, make sure that we're not getting C clutter. Sometimes wave heights can interfere with the radar signal. We're also able to tilt the radar. We have an actuator, an arm that actually tilts the antenna, the radome antenna. So we're looking straight up into the sky at times. So we can adjust that level.
The other things, we're also looking at the ADS-B software. So we're tracking, commercial traffic transmissions. So we can visualize that on a monitor. The other thing is, for biomass, we could see that with hyperspectral cameras very easily.
And we're also tracking the merchant ships out there as well with marine apps.
It's called MARA apps.
So we're watching for all these things and trying to identify as much as we can identify.
I really admire what you guys have done, because I've actually priced a hyperspectral camera, and from memory, they're about $50,000. They're a very expensive piece of kit. You really have put your heart and soul into this as a scientific project, haven't you?
We have.
Yeah, we put our best in it.
It's a big investment in equipment and a huge dedication. I mean, just to be out there, for hours at a time, sometimes not seeing anything, and it's you got to be patient. You got to be vigilant as far as
especially with researchers like Donna, and we had some other researchers out there, but they're not being paid. They're out there volunteering their time for 12 hours all night long.
That's right.
So listen, I know you boys have had your own weird experience in your youth, and I'm going to ask you both whether you've ever seen a UFO before this Long Island project. But I'm going to go to Donna first. Donna, are you an experiencer? Have you had any experience with the phenomenon yourself before this research?
Absolutely. Right now, I live on a hill on Long Island, off the North Shore, but not directly on the North Shore. And I've seen things in the sky here. I've seen orbs of many kinds, luminous orbs in the distance, and I've also seen people just seeing a red orb. I don't see a red orb. I saw a red-orange orb that actually appeared to travel through the trees, and I watched it from window to window on the south side of my home, and I actually saw it. This was like before 12 midnight, and this was a few years ago, maybe 2015, and I actually saw it land on the house kitty quarter to mine across the street. And I tried to wake everyone in my household up, and no one cared. Everyone thought they were dreaming or I was dreaming. And so that's happened quite a few times where I've seen orbs. Usually they are of the luminescent variety, but this one was red-orange, like a fluorescent red-orange. And it was pretty sizable, though I'm not adept at sizing it correctly. And then, of course, I had a hitchhiker effect during the course of study with John and Jerry. John did as well. And I saw for the first time, a small orb woke me up right in my bedroom, which was very dimly lit. And it wasn't a very bright orb, and it was a very small orb, about 6 inches in diameter. But I opened my eyes, and there it was, just a few feet from my face. And I watched it move across the wall from my door to the closet area. And then I was just telepathically communicating with it because I didn't know what else to do. And I thought that it was important because I had not seen such a phenomena before. And I thought, wow, I'm learning a lot about high strangeness. And it's really, the more you open that trap, the more you see, you notice, maybe because your mind is tuned into it. And it wasn't, like I said, the light wasn't very light. It had very low albedo. But even though it had low albedo, it was only there less than a minute. And I saw it actually dim further than it already was. And I was sad. This all happened very quickly. And I was sad because I felt like whatever it was departing, and which it did. But I wished it a message. I said, I hope, you come back and I get to know, who or what you are. I didn't know any other way to communicate with it other than as a human.
Did it talk back?
Object or an animate object, I'm not sure.
Did it talk back, Donna?
No, and I didn't. I don't think I received any message. I don't feel I've received any return messages, but I don't feel that I felt any negative feeling in return. If anything, it was lukewarm or positive. So I'm still hopeful. And maybe tonight when I retire and go to bed, I'll wish it back.
Now, Jerry and John, there's a really interesting story that I understand you have from when you were younger boys as twins. And there was a very strange visitor came to your door. Are we talking about a Men in Black?
Well, something is interesting is I compare him to, I don't know if you ever saw The Exorcist, the trailer for The Exorcist, when the priest shows up with the dark suit and the fedora hat, and he knocks at the door and it's very foggy out. It was a trailer for the Exorcist, but that's what this guy looked like. He was in this dark suit. He had a fedora hat. And he claimed he was working with an exterminating company called Slugabug.
The only thing is, if you can believe that.
Yeah, the other thing is he invited himself in. Of course, we were young, and we had a friend over there that was older than we were, and she let him in. So he sat himself down in the living room and he started talking about. He had a suitcase full of materials on UFOs and Edgar Casey and various paranormal phenomena. And he started to talk to us about the phenomena. He would talk to my older brother and say that he saw him as a psychic sensitive or someone who was very intuitive, and he talked about paths we may take in life related to this.
Yeah. And the odd thing about it is none of us could remember any physical attributes about this character.
Couldn't remember what he looked like.
I remember the hat. He had removed his hat, but I cannot remember what he looked like, and none of us could. We could.
How old were you at the time?
Many times. I would say probably 7, maybe 7 years old at the time. It was
7 or 8.
7 or 8.
Pat was maybe 12. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was
the cool bit I like is you did your own research into sluggerbug, which is a great name, by the way, for a pest extermination service. Is there a sluggerbug?
There was a sluggerbug in Florida,
but much later, decades later in Florida, but nobody had that name, and I know the authorities were called in at that time, to investigate it, and nobody else saw this character. And I remember when he left, we had quickly, looked out the windows and the door to see if he got into a car and that sort of thing. We never did see what vehicle he arrived in. He was just gone.
He walked, but if he walked, he walked very fast. Like I said, not remembering the attributes.
When you were twin boys, presumably reading comics and watching bad TV, were you also interested in UAPs? Did you have any paranormal experiences as kids apart from that weird Man in Trilby hat Men in Black incident?
Yes, we have. As twins, maybe it's more an occurrence with twins, but we've had shared dreams. We've had premonitions that. I felt at the time. I don't have them as many of these occurrences now, but as a kid, I remember seeing things that a day or two or a week later they would come to be.
Can I ask you this? Do you think the reason why the phenomenon has shown itself to all three of you may have something, and I'm inviting you to speculate, do you think it may have something to do with the fact that your minds were twigged as young people with the fact that there is something out there that is anomalous and is paranormal? Do you have to have a switch flicked in your head to make you even aware of the existence of this phenomenon?
That was an idea we were considering.
They do experience, like Gary Nolan, a lot of the people who are in
that's true too. Yeah,
I was thinking of Gary. I mean, I know Gary's come out and looked at your project and been very impressed, and he had his own paranormal experience as I think an 11-year-old newspaper boy. He had a gigantic craft hover over him, and he had a kind of a kundalini experience, a vibration experience in his bedroom. What intrigues me is the possibility that you were sought out by that weird character all those years ago when you were 7-year-old boys, and that might have directed the course of your research. Did you ever think about that?
We've always wondered about that.
We did actually wonder about that. I mean, that kind of got our interest going in things like UFOs or paranormal phenomena.
Yeah, it kind of paved the way. I mean, even looking into technology and so forth, the kind of careers that we chose later on.
One of the technical careers.
Technical science
related. We want to understand these things in some way.
Right, and we've always had that interest.
They tell this story because it's very pivotal in their life. And so before they even knew that there would be a Nightcrawler research platform, they told me this story years ago. So it made an impression on them. And I think it did fashion them to have an interest in the exact
Yeah, I know this one will drive the debunkers crazy, but I do wonder sometimes whether there is a consciousness that's going around twigging people like yourselves, inserting ideas into your head in dreams or in, semi-waking states and implanting the idea, you guys should take an interest in UAPs, UFOs. I suspect it's not a coincidence that you've got this interest. One thing I want to move to is the 5 observables. Lou Elizondo talks about the 5 observables, the various phenomena, the anomalous phenomena signs. And one of the videos that you've got appears to show one of those observables, video 6, NIR water orb and hovering orbs. You see an orb seemingly moving in and out of the water, which suggests that whatever these objects are, they're transmedium. Do you agree?
Yes, because we had a couple of instances where was some of these objects we had noted them touching down on the water, and they would seem to pass through the water without disturbing the water, which was interesting.
Yeah, and we recorded that several times. We used in that case. We used we have a camera. One of the hyperspectral cameras is Swire. It's a shortwave infrared, and what that gives us is the water has a high absorption rate at that wavelength, so it comes up black. There's nothing else you can see other than the dark ocean. But if there's an object that is on top of that water, it's seen very clearly in Swire. So we can see that object, and if it submerges like we believe it did, it didn't disturb the water. It just kind of shrunk in size, and it seemed to be under the water.
So you do think it actually went into the water and showed no visible. What I'm looking for is it showed no visible disturbance to the surface of the water as it entered.
Exactly. That's what we
noted. We haven't seen any disturbance of the water, which was very odd.
There's another document which I think is really important, and it shows a disc-shaped object, almost a craft-looking object. It has the purplish glow that we were talking about earlier. And if I'm not mistaken, in this still image, it shows a bright underlight. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
I think it's a still picture. They look like a square inside the circle.
Yes, that's right.
That's the one that's the still frame.
Right. Okay. So that was a still frame. That was from the observation in August 28th. That was the encounter that we had at the time. There was an object under the triangle. There was an object that seemed to literally fall out of the sky, and Donna observed it first, and we were able to track it with the cameras, the infrared cameras, the night vision cameras. And this object seemed to move closer to our location, to the shoreline, and then back off again. And what we ended up doing was we were hitting it with a visible torch, 100,000 lumen light. And we were all able to see the reflection. It was no longer infrared. We could see the reflections from the flashlight. And I was able to take still images from it and enhance those images. And it appears like there's some kind of an opaque or translucent dome around a polyhedral shape in the center of it.
That's what excited me about that still video. And you see a small orb that comes out from a distant triangle, and it's coming towards you on the beach. And John, you light it up with a gigantically powerful torch.
Yes, and there was four of us out there that night. There was we had Donna, we had Sue, Gerald, and myself, and we all had our hyperspectral cameras. We had the night vision cameras with us, and once I hit the object with the light, everybody was able to see these objects. And I think Donna can, you can attest to that also. That the object was giving off a reflection. That was
my goggles, my IR goggles failed.
Oh, that's right. Her particular.
During an incident with Donna's talk, has three of our.
One thing I want to caution is if you talk over each other, you audio sound deaden the other person. So can I just get Donna's account, please?
Well, while John and Jerry were having this encounter, Sue, she's a registered nurse, and I were prepping the Nightcrawler for other other protocols, and we actually at some point heard a scuffle, and we looked and we saw John and Jerry running, but not fast because they couldn't. It was beach sand they were running through. We were parked right at the opening of the cut, and I knew, and so did Sue, that something had happened. But we had no idea until John and Jerry calmed down and told us what had happened, that they had spotted something in the sky, something came out of the water. One fell, then the other fell. Temporarily, they could not move. Then they were able to get up. They thought maybe this was a weapon. They weren't sure, so they wanted to get back to the Nightcrawler. And so we saw them, we heard them huffing and puffing. Then we saw them and we realized that they were distressed, so something was up. And so they updated us, and then I don't know, we spent like maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes discussing it. And then we all hightailed it back to the beach. And we still saw that formation, that those 3 points of light, but not with the eye at all, only with the working cameras, because my goggles had failed back at the Nightcrawler for a reason I don't know why. And then there were other failures that night. So you do get that. You get the battery drains, and we did also experience equipment failure for no reason.
And so, John and Jerry, that's where the comment was made. You guys were obviously very upset about what had happened. You'd been paralyzed. And so that's why you ran like a bunch of...
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'd say pretty much.
So describe to me, John and Jerry, what happened when you were actually paralyzed, presumably by this object that came towards the beach?
It's not something, even today, we can't really wrap our heads around, as far as, what came over us, what it was that produced that effect, but it was a physical effect. It was a biological effect. I tried to move away from it. I had observed a rectangular beam of light that was being, it seemed to reflect my IR rangefinder on my lunar optics night vision. And every 1 second flash, I could see this object getting much closer to our location. Finally, it overloaded the cameras. The cameras were washed out with it looked to me like, the infrared light. When I pulled the camera down, I couldn't see anything other than, just sky. But in the cameras were actually overloaded by some kind of an infrared radiation, infrared energy. And as I turned to move away from the shore, I said to my brother, I said, it's on top of us. And as I turned, my legs gave out. I collapsed. I just collapsed onto the sand, and I couldn't coordinate my legs under me to pick myself back up.
And this happened to both of you?
Yeah, Gerald. When I heard John yell and that he couldn't get up, he couldn't move. I didn't understand it, so I tried to pull him back up, and he was starting to regain the strength. It was less than a minute, the effect. Then I collapsed, and I lost all strength and muscle tone in my legs. I couldn't do the same. I couldn't coordinate my legs underneath. I'd use my arms to actually pull myself in the sand. And while this was happening, there was something happening to our camera, the camera was working intermittently, but it recorded an event. It recorded something that entered the optics, some sphere of light that got beyond the iris of the camera, which is bizarre because the iris. I was used to be a camera technician. I used to repair these cameras, service these cameras before engineering, and the intensity of the light. With the iris motor, you have a diaphragm in there that closes down, and it closes down instantly if there's intense light to protect the CCD. So it's a loop that the gain control that actually shuts this stuff down and adjusts the light level coming in. This seemed to be working. The iris motor seemed to be working, but the intensity of the light was beyond. It looked like it was beyond the iris motor when we looked at the playback. Almost looked like there was an intense form of light inside, just beyond the iris motor.
So you know what I mean by the sixth observable. There's a lot of talk that there's not 5 observables, there's 6, and the sixth observable is biological effects. You guys may, in fact, have suffered the biological effects of a UAP.
It could be.
That's what we believe.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other cause.
It doesn't even make sense. The two of us experienced the same thing, and it wasn't just bio effects on us. When we were looking at that object, when that object finally disappeared, there were 2 crustaceans on the beach, a krill and a shrimp. They were both glowing intense luminosity in the IR range, and we collected those 2 specimens. They were a few feet from where we experienced this incident, and they were supercharged with this IR energy, which makes no sense.
What could possibly cause that?
Well, that's the thing. It wasn't bioluminescence. Bioluminescence occurs at a frequency of 450 to maybe 577 nanometers. And that's in the visible spectrum. These things were, the wavelength. These were in the infrared, and that makes no sense whatsoever.
So
Yeah,
they were dead,
70.
these creatures?
They were dead, and we had brought them back in the specimen.
Desecrated, you said.
They
Right?
were, we brought them back in the specimen container, and I had examined them under a microscope. They were desiccated. Both of them had large openings in their thorax. It looked like the internal organs avulsed. It looked like a thermal expansion effect of the insides being bursted out.
So there are so many incidents, and I'm actually, I could keep on going all day, guys. But honestly, there are so many incidents in what you've described and shot in your videos. That there is one that intrigued me though, because it's actually not over the beach. It's video 36, Holbrook incident, and you see a huge light over a backyard. What's that story?
Okay, so this is what we think is another example of a hitchhiker effect, and this time was videotaped on the cameras of the RV. I'll let John explain.
Right. So we had gone out there earlier in the night and had returned home at, I guess, around 1:30. And I live roughly about 25 minutes from the research location at Rob Moses State Park. So the vehicle had the cameras running. There's 4 different cameras. They're night vision cameras, fixed cameras on the platform on the RV, and each one is at different positions: the passenger side, the driver's, the front and back. And they were recording overnight, and within about 2 hours of the vehicle being parked, I had turned into bed, and we noticed that the next day I checked the video because it was giving an indication that it recorded something. And I checked the recording, and it started out with we have 3 street lights over the vehicle. One was in front, roughly about 300 feet ahead. There was a street light behind the vehicle, directly behind, literally over the RV. And there was another street light on the passenger side that was probably another maybe 200 feet away from it. And all 3 street lights shut down at the same time that night. And you could see an interference pattern developing in the video cameras, almost like it's a radio frequency interference of some sort, electromagnetic interference. And you'd see on the back of the frame structure of the RV, where the camera was overlooking, you'd see a blue light appear, and the blue light grew, got brighter and brighter, turned into white light, and it would just remain there for a period of time. And then you could see the street lights recover one after another very quickly, sequentially. And the only thing I can do that, these are, I believe they're sodium vapor lights, and they have on top of the top hats on these hoods of the lamps, there's a photosensor, and that photosensor is designed to sense sunlight in the morning and shut the lights down. So something in the I believe it was in the infrared spectrum, had triggered those sensors are also sensitive to the infrared, the near infrared. So it tripped those sensors, and all those lights shut down at the same time.
Not only were you followed home by whatever the phenomenon is, it was also not visible. The only reason you were able to see this is because you had the cameras that can see in that infrared spectrum.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And another interesting thing is the only way you can shut these photo sensors down is that light has to be above those hoods.
The hoods, yeah. I mean, the photo sensors are straight up. They're vertical. They're at a zenith to the sky.
Right. Donna, one of the things I'm interested in is, here are you guys off the coast of Long Island gathering 50 at least extraordinary videos of anomalous incidents. Have there been, and I know there's been times where you've wondered whether somebody else is taking an interest in what you're recording? Have there been unknown planes around the area during the period when you've been filming, perhaps also taking an interest in the phenomenon that you're observing?
Well, I would say none that we were really able to identify, although there was one day, and this again was back in August 2022, so that would be the 2nd month into the phase 1 study, where John witnessed some extraordinary activity. And John and Jerry and I, we had already reported to the park police and other local officials, local only, that we had seen some strange things already in the sky, with IR equipment, and did they know what this could be? And we were looking into what the drone laws were and that information. And John saw some craft in the sky, and he saw search beams that were focusing on the sky, not on the ocean. So if it's Coast Guard, you would be able to get radar hits. If it was Coast Guard, they would be focusing on the water. So we thought that that was very unusual, and we thought, well, what timing? The week before, we had went to the park police and let them know that we are seeing something that we have not yet been able to categorize or identify.
John and Jerry, there's one video I'm interested in, video 9, and it's the 16th of January 2023, and there appears to be an unknown plane adjacent to orbs that you're taking an interest in. Do you know the one I mean?
Was that the Tic Tac?
Yeah.
That might have been the Tic Tac video.
No, it was a nighttime image, and it seems to be an aircraft that's adjacent to orbs. So
okay, yeah, I think you're talking about the aircraft that we used the 60 times zoom. We zoomed in on it. It looked like a small dot of light. We wanted to identify it, so at 60 times zoom, we could easily see an aircraft and its navigation fuselage. So we saw this aircraft, and what we noticed was about four orbs of light, almost look like fireballs that were trailing it. And we had watched to see if the aspect ratio would change, so we'd see maybe the navigation lights were hidden, but these never showed any navigation light. These four orbs of light. The plane though was very obvious with the navigation light, so these things we couldn't identify.
Right, and they would seem to be in the flight path of the plane as well.
So that's the thing that interests me about all of this. Let's do a closer, if you like, because I've gone way over time, but I've been so fascinated by what you've told me, and thank you so much for sharing it.
No problem.
What I find fascinating about all of this is we are talking about an extraordinarily sensitive and busy area of airspace in the continental United States. It's probably one of the most busy areas of airspace, both military and civilian. Do you agree that categorically what you are recording raises flight safety and national security issues?
Oh, absolutely. I believe so. There was an interesting incident that occurred, I think it was during the 1990s, the Flight 800 crash.
I covered that story, TWA 800. Yeah. They put the crash down to kept on wiring arcing inside the fuel tank. I did a whole
right, and that was never determined as a certainty. That was the educated guess of the National Transportation Safety Board. But they know that the explosion that started the incident started in the center fuel tank. Now, the interesting thing is that can also happen from an impact, is that there were like maybe 700 witnesses, approximately around that number, who saw a flash of light heading up towards the plane. Obviously, they told people that they were.
Can I tell you, boys, I'm so pleased you raised this because I was scared to raise it in case I sound like a nutty conspiracy theorist. I covered that story and I interviewed people about the crash of TWA 800, and I remember speaking to people telling me that they saw a flash of light coming up towards the aircraft, and it was very quickly shut down in the NTSB investigation. Mm-hmm. And there were, obviously there was this argument that it was a problem with very badly covered wiring. They didn't have Teflon coating on the wiring in the proper way, so it cracked and caused an arc. But yes, there is a question mark in my mind that this is the area for where one of the most mysterious aircraft crashes of all time took place, right in this flight path area, and it's never been properly explained. I think we should just leave it as an open question whether there was perhaps a collision with an anomalous object.
It's certainly something that should be considered as a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, it was within about less than 7 miles of where we were.
And it's out where we're seeing these objects, and of course, could have been a collision, maybe even an accidental collision. It's possible.
Sure, and I know you guys can't talk about it because you've been asked not to, but my own sources in the FBI are telling me that the feds are taking a very, very close interest in your work. And I know you're talking about a new phase to your study? What's next?
Yes.
Are you going to go out on boats? Are you going to be using drones? What's the next phase of your study?
John had summarized it. He could probably.
We initiated a phase. So we actually started, of course, this is a point now in time where, we're experiencing some funding issues and so forth, getting the ARB out there and getting enough volunteers and so forth to spend time with it. But phase 2 is going to involve, which actually has involved already, is remotely operated hyperspectral camera systems. So these camera systems can be visualized or viewed from any location.
And they're fully integrated with a small millimeter wave radar system.
Right, and they all contain a millimeter wave radar system, which gives a 3-mile range in the line of sight and in the visual range of the cameras. So as a detecting source. The cameras can be tracked. There's a pan and tilt operation on some models of it. But they can be put in areas that we have no access to or we're not frequented to, or popular areas, maybe areas that have higher incidences of these sightings, and utilized, to try to identify the possibility of whether or not we need to send a laboratory to that particular location and do a full length study. Again, this is, we're also using extensive use of millimeter wave radar, because we kind of suspect that what we're getting back on some of these returns is that there's a delay in the signal, and this is something, like I said, it's been talked about since the 1920s. We're just wondering why, and we've had a couple of really interesting radar anomalies where we would use the background ships in the background that were basically 9-12 miles out, and use that as a reference. And our returns would show elongated track patterns, almost like they were being delayed, because we have a mechanical circulating radar system.
And just to emphasize the point that you were making, one possible explanation for those delays is gravitational lensing.
Exactly. That's what we're kind of suspecting this point. So
what would cause gravitational lensing? Let's take this to its logical conclusion. Some kind of propulsion device, perhaps?
Some kind of propulsion system, and which correlates, we believe, with these odd frequencies that we've been getting as well. So we're trying to put this all together as a means of detection of these objects, using fixed system satellites, using GPS locators and that sort of thing, because the same would happen to any radio signal as well as light, in the full electromagnetic spectrum. We can see the same distortion with LiDAR.
John, Jerry, and Donna, I just want to take my hat off to you guys. What the work that you have done is exceptional. It's astonishing. And it exemplifies everything that I think all of us want to see in citizen science trying to validate and investigate the phenomenon. So congratulations to you. And I think I speak for everybody watching this. We really are excited by the work that you're doing. If I can promote or assist in any way in helping you get further publicity on this issue, please let me know. I'm very, very excited by the methodical quality science that you've done here. I'll be interested to see how the splenetic debunkers deal with your work, because you've done some phenomenal research. And my hearty congratulations to you. I'll get spanked by NewsNation for letting this go on so long, but the bottom line is I've loved this conversation, and I want to do it again.
It was a lot of fun for us.
Yes.
Keep in touch.
We appreciate all the support. Tom.
Yes, we're very happy to be on your show and participate in this. This is great.
Thank you so much for talking to Reality Check, and we'll have you back on again soon. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.